Hi everyone, Meteorologist Joel Curtis with your marine weather. Starting out with today's sea ice edge, the ice is actually moving southward a little bit with the northerly winds and the very cold temperatures that we've had over the west. And the ice forecaster says, however, it will not reach St. Paul Island. For tonight's weather, we've got a low pressure system in the Gulf. It's 96 millibars just around Kennedy Entrance. This system has been actually back curving into the Gulf from the east. There's a couple of troughs associated with it, but you can see the lines on the map showing the strong winds across Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. And then the next system, you can see the warm front that's out in the western section there. That's the leading edge of the system, and precipitation in the form of snow or mixed precipitation is out ahead of it. For Tuesday's weather, that warm front strengthens up as it crosses the Bering Sea. It's going to be about the Pribilofs roughly around 3 p.m. or so. In the meantime, the low pressure system in the Gulf has slid south off of Kodiak Island, with a trough extending in the interior, but also a cold front is forming up on the south edge of that. And so we've got really two weather systems that are causing some weather for the state. And then for Wednesday's weather, we've got the slug of warm air now has hit the west coast of Alaska. 985 millibar low, almost to the Bering Strait, with a cold front now extending southward. A little bit cooler air behind this, but you can see as close as the lines are on the map that we do have some wind to have to deal with. And then the 972 parent low that's further to the west, that one we're going to have to be keeping an eye on too in the longer range. In the meantime, in the Gulf of Alaska, 1010 millibar low has now formed an occluded front, and that onshore wind, especially aloft, is causing precipitation across southeast Alaska, but there's not a whole lot of wind with that system right there. So for southeast Alaska, the marine forecast for Tuesday, generally southerlies with gusts of 35 in the central regions on the inside waters, and seas up to about 6 feet in Clarence Strait, otherwise around 4 feet or so. But a little bit of onshore, 15 to 20 knots or so as you're off the central part of the Panhandle, and then coming around to southeast, feeling that next low, about 20 knots and seas 7 feet. For Wednesday, we've got on the inside waters 10 ramping up to 20 as you get further south, seas up to 6 feet in Clarence Strait, otherwise 2 to 3 feet on the inside. And then you can start to see that offshore direction, and that's responding to the low in the Gulf, 25 to 20 knots or so, seas up to 8 feet because there's a bit of a southwest swell. For Tuesday's marine forecast for South Central, again, southeasterlies around 15 to 20 knots or so in the eastern sections. But then a little northeasterly down through Cook Inlet and seas 5 feet, and there's plenty of open water for that fetch to develop. And then 15 to 20 knots down through Kennedy Entrance aimed at Augustine out of the southeast, seas up to 5 feet. Then for Wednesday, we've got the easterlies are starting to kick in, 15 knots only in Prince William Sound, but 20 to 25 knots on the outside water circulating around the Gulf low, and then 10 to 20 knots on Cook Inlet down to the waters for Kennedy Entrance, 20 knot northwesterlies and seas 5 feet. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Tuesday, the gales are starting to ramp up, and we're starting even to see some storm force gusts there. So all northwesterlies are the direction. On the Pacific side, we've got 30 up to 35 knots, 40 knots down out of Sitkinak, gusts to 60. So that wind is really crossing over, responding to that low that's moved to the south. Meantime, on the Bering Sea side, still around 30 knots, but seas up to 11 feet with a good long fetch on that. And so what I wanted to mention for the western waters, particularly from St. Matthew Island down to Bristol Bay, is we're expecting some extreme vessel icing. So 4 centimeters an hour, roughly 1.5 inches or so, and it's that whole area, and that's going to be through Tuesday. So a real caution on that. If anybody has to go outside and work in that kind of situation, the ice buildup is going to be very, very rapid. Cold temperatures and a northerly type wind direction. So Wednesday's marine forecast. First of all, for the Aleutian chain, we've got westerly winds anywhere from about 20 knots on up to 40 for southwesterlies in the far western Aleutian. Seas up to 15 feet or so, 11 feet or so out there. But on the Bering Sea side, seas running about 6 to maybe up to 9 feet or so. And then on the Pacific side, much less sea, anywhere from 4 to 6 feet. And then for the Aleutian chain, again on Wednesday, now you can really see those southwesterlies starting to ramp up, and we've got a long fetch for a sea to build up. So we got one reading of storm force 50, otherwise 40 to 45 knots, and seas up to 23 feet out by Shimei or so. And but as you get further east, a little bit less sea. Again, out over the central Bering, that's where that fetch is really going to build up. And so for the west coast on Tuesday, we've got wind is anywhere from about 5 all the way up to 20 knots down by St. Matthew. Westerlies 20 knots for the Pribilofs, and then those 30-knot northwesterlies kicking in for the Bristol Bay area. Lots of ice-covered waters, but out in the Bering Sea up to 8 feet. And then looking at Wednesday, now we get going. Again, whole gales, 45 knots down to the Pribilofs, seas 19 feet, St. Matthew waters 40, and then ramping down about 30 in Bristol Bay, but still 40 knots off of the Kuskokwim River entrance, and then a gale force 35 knots out over the ice anywhere from Nome to Makoyak. And then for Tuesday's marine forecast for the North Slope, first of all, down through the Bering Strait, about 10 to 15 knots over ice, and then 5 to 10 knots along the North Slope. And then as we get to Wednesday, start seeing those easterlies 15 to 20 knots for the North Slope, but there's our southeasterlies with that warm front has pushed north. Gale force, 35 knots in most areas, 40 knots off of Nunivak Island, and that's going to do it for the marine forecast. So please, file a flow plan and stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning in.